Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk with Layne and Lisa. Hey Layne.
Hello.
So friends, Layne has a great one lined up for us today. And before we roll into it, remember that if you want to learn more about the Gardener's Workshop, where we have so many great resources for you over there, just drop in anytime at thegardenersworkshop.com because that's what keeps Layne and I busy whenever we aren't on here talking to you.
Yeah.
What's today about, Layne?
Well, I love a good checklist. And I really felt like we needed a checklist of what you should be doing in the fall if you have a cutting garden or if you have a cut flower farm. What are some of the things you need to be thinking about and doing in the fall, specifically in terms of bed preparation to set yourself up for this season, for the winter, and for the upcoming spring?
That's a great one because I can look back how what I do has evolved through the years. And I will tell you that we have prevented so much work by doing some timely jobs in the fall. And I mean, your morale all through the winter, it
Oh,
just helps so much. So, yeah, that's great. Let's hit it.
and fall is just the best time to be working outdoors.
Yes.
It's
Nothing
just,
like shoveling with the coat on or, raking or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. And I always like to say for our listeners and viewers that live in the Southern Hemisphere, there are a lot of tips in here for you as well that would apply at any time of year, but there will be some special things we'll be talking about that are focusing on fall. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so when you're talking about flower beds, the first step you need to think of when it's getting close to the fall is to decide when you need to tear down these beds and how. So, first, let me ask you, Lisa, when do you know it's time to tear down a bed? What are some of the things that would cause you to actually say, this bed, it's time to come down?
Sure, and that's a great question. When we're harvesting is when all those decisions are made. When we go to a bed that I feel like is either really pooping out from weather conditions, maybe it's cooling off and they just aren't regrowing, or they're getting shorter, or as in Celosia's instance, they oftentimes start setting seed really quickly as the days
Yeah.
start shortening up. And that really makes them a challenge to get a seed-free bloom, right? So when we're harvesting, once a bed stops producing what I think it's worthy of, that's when it's earmarked. It's time to eliminate that bed.
And how about if you just need that bed, you need that bed for some fall planted cool flowers? Would that also cause you to take down a bed?
Sure. And so, that's always part of my big plan picture is to, group things together so that, for instance, say this time of the year when, we still have probably 3 or 4 more weeks of potential cutting season. So all those flowers that we planted later in the summer, we tried to congregate together in an area of beds to leave those so that we, in fact, can tear down those beds that the cool season hardy annual plants, better known as cool flowers, those beds can be prepped and prepared on in a timely manner for those. So yeah, you got to get beds ready for those fall plantings.
And even something like if you notice there's a lot of disease issues going on in a bed, that could be another reason where you just say, okay, this bed is going to come out now.
Sure, sure.
And how far in advance of replanting a bed do you like to tear it down?
That is really based on a lot of things, not a lot, several factors. One is weather. If rain is coming next week, and I know we either need to go from beginning to end of tearing down and getting beds prepped, but getting crops out of beds before rain in the fall, because once it rains in cooler conditions, right, it takes a long time to dry out. So you want to prevent that. And if there's vegetation in the bed, it can take even longer to be able to prep that.
And one other thing I want to mention before we keep talking about tearing down beds, it's very possible that you might have an area that you want to leave some of these beautiful seed heads up throughout the winter to provide support for wildlife,
Yeah.
birds or insects or other creatures that appreciate the seed, or even just the habitat that the dead foliage provides. That's another possibility. And I know, Lisa, you have a large native border where you do that.
We do. Our farm is almost 100%, except for right across the front of my house. We are engulfed in a mixed native border of trees and shrubs, as well as we have what's called a habitat island that's amongst our cutting garden, which is never mowed, never torn down, and it's really rich in lots of rudbeckias and Joe Pye weed. And just a lot. And I just planted some ironweed in there. We cut from it a little bit, but those are primarily the home bases for all of our wildlife, from beneficial insects right up to birds and other creatures. We have lots of frogs and turtles here too. So, but for us to maintain our flower farm, we obviously have to do progress. So yeah, it's necessary, but we go to extremes to provide for wildlife.
All right. And then now let's continue with our discussion of tearing down the beds. So, how do you go about tearing down a bed in the fall or any time of year, depending on if it's a no-till bed or one of your beds that you till the conventional way?
Sure. So first you remove the netting and any irrigation. And then in the no-till area, we literally hand pull the crops that are in there and they go to the compost heap. In the conventional beds, they're bush hog or flail mode. And that removes all the vegetation. And then we till. And so those two steps prepare you for whatever is destined for that bed, whether it's fall planted, cover crop, or very early spring or spring. So the conventional beds that we mow, we just leave that debris. I mean, it chops it up. That's why I prefer using our flail mower, which really turns the vegetation into confetti, which means it breaks down really, really quickly. And again, depending on your soil, your weather conditions, how long do you have to wait after you incorporate that debris into your soil before you make beds, right? Ours moves really quickly because we do use a flail mower and our soil is so active and alive, it just digests products really fast. So you have to kind of figure out that timeline. And I will tell you, earlier is better than later if you're questioning how long it's going to take your soil to digest that debris before it's time to till, put in fertilizer, and prepare your beds.
Right. All right. So the next thing you need to do is to determine what your plan is for each of these beds. So are you planning on immediately planting them up with some fall transplants or direct seeding into them? Are you planning on cover cropping them for the winter? Or are you planning on preparing a bed now that you'll be planting into in very early spring and you're going to need to silage, tarp, or mulch it in some way? But the main thing is you don't want to leave bare soil.
Yeah, Layne, that I mentioned earlier that how it's evolved through the years. I can remember this time of the year being so hot and exhausted from a long season that I just kind of left stuff because I was so tired thinking, oh, I'll deal with it in the spring. Well, that builds the nightmare for removing netting, first off, and danger. I mean, you just cannot do that. But that only adds more weed seeds in your garden. That means you can't plant appropriately. You have to tackle this huge mess. And it makes your winter, you kind of suffer every day that you look out there and see it. I cannot tell you how aligning your steps with what should be done, how it changes your morale and the morale of the people helping you and the people you're living with, right? So yeah, you really have to know what your plan is and definitely not leaving any bare soil. There's no bare soil on this farm by December is our goal.
So how would you prepare your beds in each of these three cases that I just mentioned?
Sure. So our beds we definitely prefer to make our beds till and prepare and make beds with Bio 360 for cool season hardy annuals. We use it year round, but particularly we've learned how much better of a job that the film does in weed suppression because plants don't do a lot of top growth during the winter, but you can count on the cool season weeds do a lot of top growth. So there's a lot of competition and you have to put really deep organic mulch to prevent that from happening, which is not very good for small transplants, right? So we use Bio 360. So where we're going to fall plant, we would till, get that debris digested, Then we would apply the organic fertilizer that we use according to directions. Then we make beds. We either make the beds without film, for direct seeded beds. We just don't apply the film, but we raise them up, mold them, and then we make our beds for fall transplants. And those beds will get leaves in the pathways or bark, whichever we have available to us. And then that block of a garden, which for us is 10 beds, about 50 feet long currently, that whole block, there's no soil showing. There's not a ray of sunlight, we hope, getting to the soil to sprout a weed seed.
And how would you go about preparing a no-till bed?
Sure. So in the no-till areas, what we would do is, again, we hand remove the crops, and then we do the next two steps the same. We apply up to 2 to 4 inches of compost just to the bed tops, not to the pathways are maintained, right? Just to the bed tops. We do what's called, it shouldn't be called no-till, it's light tilling. We just incorporate that along with the fertilizer into the top few inches. Unfortunately, because of our dog Tucker, if we don't incorporate the fertilizer, he tends to eat it. So about the top 4 inches, we just mix it all up. It just makes it easier. And then we can mulch, and we can either tarp those prepared beds for either very early spring or spring plantings. I mean, that's a dream, y'all, to uncover those beds in very early spring or spring, and they are literally ready to roll. No weeds because you've tarped them all winter. So they didn't get any water, they didn't get any light, nothing's growing, but you do have to be aware. Snakes will be a resident under there, which we welcome because they eat voles and moles, right? So that is the process. And so those no-till beds or low-till beds are either planted or covered with a tarp.
So you don't typically apply cover crop in your no-till beds?
We do not now cover crop our no-till beds. It's just a little too difficult for us to incorporate and extinguish them.
So in the areas where you're using a silage tarp, what if it's a home gardener and they don't have a silage tarp, or that just doesn't work with their garden plan? What could someone cover their beds that they've prepared now for very early spring? What could they mulch them with?
Sure. So an excellent application would be to either use newspaper, like 5 to 6 sheets, covering the entire area, overlapping about 5 or 6 inches in all areas, then mulching on top of it. What the tarp really does an excellent job of, does 2 great jobs, and you can achieve one of those, is it blocks all the light from getting to the seeds that are on the surface. And by just putting down mulch, stuff happens. It shifts, it moves, a windstorm blows it, and then a little bit of light, and it doesn't take much for those winter weeds to just really get vigorous. So I love putting Bio 360 down on a bed, then mulching on top of it, like 4 to 6 inches, and then it will pretty much just be there unless a weed seed blows into the mulch and germinates. That's the only challenge there, because the other part of the real benefit of silage tarps that I've learned through using them now for so many different ways is it also blocks moisture. And obviously using mulch and Bio 360 doesn't do a really good job, although Bio 360 does not allow water to penetrate it. So it will block much of the water, but I don't know how effective that'll be. So that's worth a try. Bio 360, mulch on top of it so it looks great all winter in your landscape, hidden basically, would work.
Yeah. And on the beds where you are silage tarping, do you put Bio 360 underneath it so the beds are fully prepared, or do you just leave the bare ground and then the silage tarp on top?
So that's a good question. And we're going to experiment with this year. So I think that our fall planting is going to fill up my designated fall planted beds, even though I promised myself this would not happen. And I think that we're going to take 2 of the no-till area beds, prepare them for very early spring planting. And we're definitely going to put Bio 360 on them. And I haven't decided yet. Most likely we will not silage tarp them because they're protected, right? I mean, they've got the Bio 360 on the bed to block sun from getting to the surface, as long as the pathways are sufficiently protected. You can, but I don't know how that affects the breaking down of the Bio 360. I would think that it would not affect it because moisture and light are not getting to the Bio 360, both of which are what initiate the breakdown. So maybe we'll have to think about that.
Yeah, a little experiment. And one nice thing about using something like a silage tarp is that if there is some snow on the ground at the time you want to go plant, it's really easy to just brush it off and shuffle that snow out of the way.
It is very true. You can actually, we use a push broom in the afternoon sun, where it kind of gets a little loose, and push it off. We have planted through snow more than once.
Yeah. And how about if you're going to be cover cropping a bed? How would you prepare that bed?
So basically all the previous steps, would not add fertilizer, would just prepare the soil so it's a smooth, nice seed bed, and then plant the cover crop. And of course, cover crop seed has to be covered for it to germinate well. So you have to cover it either with a garden rake in a small area, or we use a tiller running it very shallowly, just covering it with about an inch or so of soil to keep birds from eating it, as well as it'll germinate better. And that's pretty much it.
So for fall planted direct seeded cool flowers, we always recommend direct seeding about 6 to 8 weeks before your first expected fall frost. Does that same timing apply to these cover crops that you're direct seeding, or are you willing to push that a little later for cover crops?
Good question. So you can just think of crimson clover, which is our go-to preferred, the best first timer cover crop to choose. Yes, is a cool flower. You just plant it 6 to 8 weeks, because the picture, if you're not watching this over on YouTube, it's worth going over there just to see this. The middle image is crimson clover. You can see the leaves are off the trees. And this is in wintertime. That's what you want cover crop to do. It's covering the soil. It's providing habitat. We see whole flocks of birds just disappear. It's only like 8 inches tall, 8 or 10 inches tall. And the birds just fly in and they just vanish. They're down there eating insects, taking cover. So yes, that is really great. And I really caution people, once we sell crimson clover on our website, and you won't see another cool season cover crop that we sell, because all of the others get very complicated. A lot of them need equipment to extinguish them. And what I find is sometimes people will start looking at other types on the internet shopping, and they'll get some and they'll write to me and say, oh my gosh, I planted winter cereal rye and it's now 6 feet tall. Well, let me tell you, it takes about an atomic bomb to extinguish that. I mean, and without equipment, you cannot get rid of that. And and it ruins people. They don't ever want to grow a cover crop again. So stick with a great one, crimson clover, and plant it on time.
Yeah, tried and true.
Yes.
Okay, then we've mentioned a few times how important it is to not leave bare soil. So one of the most important steps is to then mulch your pathways with something. Lisa, do you want to describe how you use leaves to mulch your pathways?
Sure. Because of the volume of what we need, the volume of mulch, we do our pathways in leaf litter that we pick up the bags on the side of the road. We do not mulch them. We do not chop them up. We load up pickup trucks, bring them home, and drag them right into the pathways and dump them out. We're looking to get about 10 to 12 inches of leaves in the pathways. And yes, a few of them do blow around, but in general, they stay where we put them, even though I'm in a very windy site. And when you use the Bio 360, the images that you're showing, Layne, shows that there's just no soil really visible for weed seeds to actually sprout. I consider that the biggest and most urgent job of fall and winter is getting the leaves. This year, we happen to have a huge pile of wood chips from a tree that was cut down. So we've actually laying those down in our cool flower garden. We're going to top those with leaves, but the leaves are not even fallen hardly yet. So a lot of weeds will grow in your pathways while you're waiting. The step that we have to then do when those pathways grow is I have to use my walk behind tiller to till the pathways to, just covering those weeds up with leaves does not extinguish them. Trust me, I have tried it many times. So we have to disturb the soil and then leaf it.
And it's not always a bad thing if your leaves can't go down right away, because we've mentioned before how sometimes it's a good idea to let those little seedlings turn into little plants first so that the leaves don't blow into your beds and smother them, especially in your direct seeded beds, maybe before they've even had a chance to sprout and get growing.
Yes, for sure.
And what are some other options aside from leaves in pathways that people might want to consider using?
So some things that I've used, landscape fabric, which is that woven fabric, which a lot of people, particularly people in the north, might use. Those of us below the mid part of the country, really struggle with landscape fabric because our aggressive and long season, the aggressive perennial weeds just jump up on it and run. We've never grown in landscape fabric. I mean, we've never put it up on beds to grow in because of a lot of issues, but we have used it in our pathways because it seemed like a real time saver. Instead of collecting all those leaves, we would just install the landscape fabric. But we soon learned after 2 years of doing that, meaning put down in, the beginning of a planting and then it had to be removed at the end, is the problems are when we are harvesting flowers and stripping debris, which is a volume of debris over the season, it builds up on top of the landscape cloth.
Yeah.
And then when it rains, it becomes a slimy slip and slide. So we had to literally either rake or blow our pathways weekly, which is a huge job to do. And then, of course, you had to rip it up at the end of the season to put it back down. So for us, the only 3 options that I use are leaves, shredded bark, just because it's free and I have it in my yard. I don't pay for it. And the other one is in the warm season, we just allow the pathways to grow, whatever pops up, and we mow them.
Yeah, those are all good options, but I do love with leaves that little crunch you get when you're walking on them. So that's an added benefit if you choose to use leaves.
Yes, we love it.
Okay, and then the last thing is just to make sure you have your beds hooped and your row cover ready to go. Even if it's not time to pull up that row cover yet, just make sure that the row cover and your hoops and your weight bags or whatever you're using to secure it are in place so that at a moment's notice, you could flip that cover up to protect your growing plants.
That is just such a great tip, Layne, because as soon as our pathways are mulched, is when we bring out the hoops, the weight bags, and the row covers. And they're not up yet, but they're out there because for us, where I am, we get so many frequent windstorms. And to be able to just pop up those row covers at a moment's notice, it protects your plants so very, very much. So planning ahead is definitely beneficial.
Yes. All right. Well, that was it for this episode of Seed Talk. We hope that this checklist will help everyone get ready for fall and going into the winter, or hopefully there were some other tips if you're at a different time of year wherever you live. But thank you so much for joining us again. We appreciate all of you, and we love when you leave ratings and reviews in a podcast app or likes and comments over on YouTube. And remember to follow or subscribe wherever you might be listening or watching, and that way you won't miss any of our future episodes. So thanks again.
So friends, until we meet again, remember to tell a friend about Seed Talk. And we'll see you again soon. Ciao.
Bye.